this. This is the ribber attachment for my circular sock knitting machine. But I've done this before. I feel like it requires a lot of time, a lot of attention, and it's kind of time that I don't have right now. So what I want to do instead is take the next baby step towards knitting ribbed socks. And today I want to talk about knitting mock ribbed socks. Hey there, welcome to the channel. I am Felicia from SweetGeorgia, and welcome to my attic space where I am making all the things. I have my weaving looms up here, my knitting machines up here, and I have just now created a little sanctuary for my sock knitting. So this is my little sock knitting nook here. Wound all the sock yarn onto cones, ready to go, so that I can kind of concentrate and focus on what I'm doing here. So like I said, I've been wanting to really get good at using this ribber attachment for the past year, but I just have not had any time. This is going to require a little bit of concentration, some time, some focus. I feel like I don't have that right now. I'm sure it's not as difficult as I'm making it out to be in my head, but in any case, I thought I would take the next baby step towards knitting ribbed socks, and that would be to knit mock ribbed socks. So the difference between a ribbed sock and a mock ribbed sock is that a ribbed sock has knits and purls, and a mock ribbed sock has basically dropped stitches. It's a spot where there should have been a stitch, but no stitch was made. And so it looks like if you stretch it out, it's going to look like a little bit of a ladder all the way down. But that is where purl stitches should go, but there are no purl stitches, there's just no stitch. And because there's no stitch, it cinches in the fabric a little bit and it makes for a slightly tighter fabric. So that is the mock rib. No actual ribbing is happening, it's just missing some stitches. So I thought today I would use my new glorious spacious setup here and crank some mock ribbed socks and show you how I go about doing that. Hey, let's make a sock. In order to do our mock ribbing, we need to remove some of these needles because those are the needles that are going to form the mock rib. So what I'm going to do is, you can see my halfway marks are right here. And so for this half of my sock, this is the front of my sock, I want to make sure that my ribbing is somewhat centered in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this needle and then skip 3 and then take out this needle, skip 3, take out this needle, and so on. So basically I'm taking out every 4th needle, and so I'm going to end up with a 3x1 rib or 3x1 mock rib. And I'm just previewing where these stitches or where these needles are going to come out. So I basically don't want to have a hole or missing a stitch or missing a needle right at the halfway marks because that will be a little bit messy, I think, to deal with. So I'm going to take these needles out and I'll just pop them in my case over here. I'm going to save them because I'm going to put them back in later. And I'm going to just crank around to the back so I can access the rest of the needles here. Now I can go ahead, now I'm going to go ahead and hang my cast on bonnet. It actually works perfectly because every loop is being hung to every other stitch. So you can see I'm putting the loop on the 1st and the 3rd needle in each group. Okay, I'm going to add my waste yarn here. Okay, and then I'm going to throw in 1 round of fishing line here. And the fishing line is going to help me pull out my waste yarn later on when I'm done my sock. Okay, so for our project yarn today, we are going to use Atlantis. This is from our new Eclipse colorway collection. So the first round of project yarn, I'm going to crank without the heel spring on. And that just allows for these stitches to be a little bit bigger, a little bit more loose, so that way when I do the hung hem, it will be easier to pick up from there. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to crank for the hung hem. Let's do about 24 rounds. So I can add my weight now. Okay, so that is 24. So now I'm going to go ahead and start to hang my hem. Taking the weights off. Okay, so we are going to find all of our purl bumps that are sort of attached to that fishing line, and we're going to pull them up and then hang them on these needles. So what I've been doing is looking at the line where the project yarn meets the fishing line, and I'm seeing basically a short bump, a short purl bump, and then a long purl bump where there should have been a stitch, but there is no stitch. And so what I do is with this set of 3 needles, I'm hanging a short, and a long. So that's kind of my pattern. Short, short, and then a long stitch. I'm going to go all the way around hanging these stitches. Okay, I'm going to crank around a little bit more so that I can access these needles here. So we've just closed up that hung hem, and now I'm going to reset my counter, and I'm going to reset it to 0. Okay, so now we're going to crank for the leg. So let's crank 50 rounds for the leg, and then we're going to do a little bit of a pre-heel. So all of this will be mock ribbing all the way around for the leg. So you can see what's happening here. All the spots where there are no needles, that's where there's almost like a ladder of yarn here. Those are where stitches should be, or purl stitches should be, but there's no stitches. And so what's going to happen is that part is going to cinch up tight and look like ribbing, even though it's actually not ribbing. Okay, so I have reached 50 rounds now, and what I want to do is I am going to move my carrier to the front of my sock. So this is the top half of my sock, and so on this top half, on the top of the foot, I want to maintain my mock ribbing. I want the ribbing pattern to go all the way down the top of my foot. But the back half where I work my heel stitches, this is the section where I want all of this to be in stockinette. So in order to do that, I need to put the needles back into place so that I can knit actual stockinette back here. So just moving the carrier to the other side, and then I'm going to pop my needles back in. So to pop the needles back in, it's actually quite easy. You can see here I have a space where I need to add my needle back, and all I do is I take these stitches and I just kind of push them forward. I push the needles forward a little bit, and you can see this little elasticized ring kind of pop out, and it's going to give a little bit more space so that I can put the needle butt back into place. So I just pop that forward, make a little space for my needle butt, slip it up, and then down and then slot. And so I'm just going to do that all the way around. And as I'm going around, I'm also checking to make sure all the latches are open. So that way when I crank around again, I don't end up with any dropped stitches. Okay, so we're going to stop here for a second. Now that you've put all the needles back into the back half of your machine, before you can crank around, you need to stop and pause and do one more thing. And that is that each one of those spots where there was no needle and now there is a needle, if you crank around, you're going to make an eyelet. You're going to make a hole, okay, in your fabric. And so that is going to look like this in a sock. This is the mock ribbing coming down. And so you can see the eyelets that are being made at the base of that mock ribbing. Okay, so we want to avoid those eyelets or those holes at the base. And so in order to do that, we need to actually lift up one of the purl bumps from a previous row and hang it on that needle so that way we're actually making a stitch to close up this hole. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. So now we have our needles back in, and what we need to do is we need to close up what will become a gap right at these spots where we've put a needle back in place, but there was no stitch before. And so what we need to do is we need to close up what would eventually become an eyelet or a hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up not this purl bump next to it, but the one just below it. So this purl bump, one row down, I'm going to pick that up and hang that on that needle that just got placed in there. And that will effectively close up the little gap. So I'm going to do that again here, picking up not this purl bump, but the row below it. So picking that one up and then hanging that on the needle. So I'm going to go around and do this to all of the needles that I just put back into place, picking up the purl bump from the row below and picking it up, putting it over the needle. So these needles all have stitches on them now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank forward about 10 rounds so that I can make a pre-heel. 10, maybe 15, let's do 15 rounds of pre-heel. And the pre-heel will have mock rib on the top of the foot and stockinette on the back of the foot. Okay, so that is 15. You can see all of this back of the foot is all stockinette now. So I'm going to move my yarn carrier to the back half of my heel so that I can lift up the front of the foot. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and forth to work my heel. So now we are ready to crank for the foot. Now normally with my foot, I might crank about 60, 63 rounds, something like that for the foot. But in this case, because I have this mock rib on the top of my foot, I actually want to switch this also to stockinette before I start any toe shaping. So what I'm going to do is I will crank, say 55 rounds for the foot, and then I'll leave the last 5 to 8 rounds with stockinette all the way around. So by that time, all of the needles will be added back in. So I'm just going to reset my counter now. And we'll crank forward. So that's 55 rounds. I'm going to pop the needles that were missing in the front of the foot. I'm going to pop those back in as well. Okay, checking all the latches are open again. So now we've reached 55 rounds. We're going to crank another 5 to 8 rounds so that all of the stockinette will knit as well. But before we can do that, we do need to do the step where we hang the purl bar from one of the previous rounds onto the needle that was just added in, so that way we don't introduce a whole bunch of eyelets or holes, kind of lacy holes at the top of the foot. So now that all those purl bumps are hung, we can go and crank all the way around. Okay, that's 63. So now we're going to work the toe. So now we're going to push back all of the stitches in the back of this machine. And then we are going to add waste yarn from here on, and your sock will be complete. So now, before you break your yarn, just make sure that you leave a good amount of yarn, because this is what you're going to use to graft your toe. You can see our beautiful stockinette stitches all the way around. Ta-da! Okay, and there we have it. We have a mock ribbed sock. And we're just going to quickly look at the cuff here. Pull out our fishing line. So here is our finished sock. This is our finished 3x1 mock ribbed sock. You can see we started with the hung hem up here. There's the ribbing inside and out for the hung hem. 3x1 mock rib all the way down the leg, and then back here is our pre-heel. It was about 15 rows of pre-heel, and the pre-heel is just like a nice place for to cover your heel with stockinette, as opposed to having the ribbing on the back of your heel. And then we actually worked the short row heel right here, and you can see the spot where the stockinette and the mock rib meet. There are no holes, there are no eyelets, there's nothing introduced in there, and so that was really important in order to close up those holes. And then turning it over to the front of the sock, you can see we still have mock rib running all the way down the front of the foot, the top of the foot, and then at the very end of the foot near the toe, we've switched everything to stockinette. And so the stockinette gives us something to graft on. So this is the way that we're going to eventually close our toes. And so I have a video about how to close your toes here by grafting the two together from the right side. There's going to be another video about grafting from the inside out. But this is how we're going to finish our toe. And then we'll have a mock ribbed sock. Now these socks, I just tried it on. It fits great. It fits better than I expected. It's very form-fitting. You can see it draws in quite a bit of the circumference of the sock. And so it's just nicer, snugger sort of fit. So in this case, I'm using the 64 cylinder. Maybe this would actually be the perfect size for my kids. I wouldn't necessarily need to switch down to a smaller cylinder size. I could just use a mock rib to tighten up the fabric and then make a slightly smaller circumference, and then that would make a better fitting sock for some people. You can see how nice this blue turned out as well. This is the new Atlantis colorway that we've just come out with, and it's got all sorts of different shades of purples and blues and all sorts of things going on in there. I really love this colorway, but you can see how that knits up. It could also do great as a sweater as well, but this is how it looks in the sock and how it looks in mock ribbing. So that was something fun, something new, a baby step towards making ribbed socks with the ribber attachment, to be continued. So thank you so much for watching today. If you like this episode and you want to learn more about circular sock knitting machines, I do have a lot of videos talking about how I knit socks on the CSM. This is the Erlbacher Speedster CSM, and you can find them at Erlbacher Knitting Machines as well. This yarn is available from us at SweetGeorgia. You can find that at shop.sweetgeorgiayarns.com. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you guys will come back and join me for another session here in my cozy little sock knitting nook with my circular sock knitting machine. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. All right, bye for now.